Everybody, welcome to week 281. And yeah, so it is hoodie time for me and for Adam. And Jack is even wearing some kind of very fashionable Under Armour fleece kind of thing, which is, it's more lawyerly than what we're wearing. But hey, but it's going to be a beautiful day, and it's a beautiful day in the Carolinas. So Adam's at the beach. We wish we were all getting the vitamin D he is, um, but nonetheless. So we're gonna get into a number of things, whatever you guys want. In addition to some stuff that we had reinforced from things that we've talked about before on building value in your company and building it to get the best multiples for your sale, which is really good. But I got to spend 6 hours with CFO who has was with Warren Buffett for 20 years in one of his portfolio companies, and it was just fascinating to hear. And so we'll riff on some of that stuff. But before we do, I know our local Cliff Clavin, Jack Santinello, has a whole bunch of facts on and data on the shutdown. And then if Adam wants to riff on any of that kind of stuff too, we'll do that. And then I thought I'd give some kind of overview on some of the interesting things that I heard from this guy from Buffett, and then let these guys riff on that and take your questions. You know what to do. You can harass us in the chat. You can ask questions in the Q&A, and some people that are nonconformists insist on asking the questions in the chat. We'll still answer them. So anyway, Jack, what do you got?
All right, so quick review and just some numbers that have come out recently about what has happened or what is the effect of the 43 days of having the government shut down. So, recap: government shutdown began October 1st because a stopgap funding bill was not passed. Stalemate was driven by fierce clash over healthcare policy. House Republicans advanced a budget that omitted an extension of Enhanced Affordable Care Act, and Senate Democrats refused to back any bill without them. Neither side was willing to budge. And of course, everybody is going like this and saying it's their fault, that fault, this fault. Um, and you have all kinds of other distractions going on, like Epstein files and things like that, which we're not going to talk about. All right, so it's
I'm not
estimated.
on the list. I'm just saying, and I'm
Yes,
I'm happy about that.
at least you're not aware that you're on the list. That's
I,
apparently what you're supposed to
they,
say.
trust me, I've never been on the Lolita Express.
All right, shutdown delivered broad economic hits. It's cost the U.S. economy an estimated 7 to 14 billion. We saw that it stalled and slowed down services that are federal services, including the TSA, air traffic controllers, all kinds of impacts on us, and things like the SNAP programs. What it also did, and I expected it would do this, was delayed some key economic reports that the rest of the world, the rest of the US relies upon to see how we're doing, how the economy is doing. So, jobs reports and those kind of things. So I think they recently came out with the September one. October is going to be a little bit delayed. It should have been out by now. So they're catching up. And so there's a little bit of disruption associated with that. Something else, and again, this is not politically motivated at all, but just the economic impact of the um, the ICE efforts in Charlotte. And I was out of town and saw it on the local news, saw it on the national news, as all of us did. Was with the Hospitality and Tourism Alliance folks yesterday, and also my friend Spencer Merriweather, who's the district attorney, was discussing some things, what's going on with them in relation to that, and hadn't thought about the fact that they are having difficulty prosecuting cases because many witnesses are afraid to come into the courtroom. That the uh, there are workers in the hotels and in the food and beverage industry that are not showing up for work. And so, I understand, and again, it's not a political statement at all. I understand there are reasons for, and there are violent criminals out there, but I think that maybe the way it was implemented was not to the liking of many people in the business who employ people who are legitimately here, well, with the appropriate paperwork, but maybe have others in their family who are not. So, again, but I'm really more focused on the economic impact of all of that, which is a slowdown of just services and things that we are accustomed to having at the, snap of our fingertips. So, but that's it. Those are the statistics that I wanted to share.
Thank you for doing that. I'm actually glad that you touched on the whole ICE thing too, because it is a conundrum. Like um, we have a number of legal immigrants that work for us from various countries and various continents. Um, and and some of them have been afraid too. And so the the cool thing is we've been able to have some really meaningful conversations with people that we care about and that sort of thing. Yeah, we need law and order, and we've allowed non-law and non-order to run rampant way too long. But man, um, it's difficult. So thank you for doing that. Now, one thing that we got to get into, and we will, Matt. You said, do you think AI has run its course? What do you know about quantum chips coming next? Actually, I had a long conversation on when Tuesday night when I was with this CFO. We had a dinner that evening with a small group of us, and one woman, her entire company is on AI, and we were talking about that. So I'll share my perspective based on that conversation with somebody who's much more of an expert in it than I am. But Adam, you have been patiently been soaking up the sun at the beach. So hit
Wearing a
us.
fabulous sweatshirt, by the way. I don't know, you can't see. There you go.
Oh,
Go Heels.
Carolina.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you,
I can't control the iPad camera either, but yeah, that's we're back. It's basketball school, Jack, not a football school. Let's
Yes,
just
I know.
now we're just finally back into being what they're meant to be, basketball school. So, um, anyway, yeah, so, our topic is Warren Buffett today and being like Buffett. So I asked Gary if I could, before he chimes in on, some things that he heard listening to one of Warren Buffett's portfolio companies, former CFOs, or at least I believe that's who you got
yeah,
the
that's
opportunity to
right.
hear speak, especially as it relates to AI. And Matt's question is that, you know, I what I have heard is that if you differentiate between AI and, so like when someone says generically, because this will, I swear I'm going to land the plane on this with Warren Buffett, Jack. When someone says, "Hey, has AI run its course?" That really is a two-part question. One is, has AI run its course? Like literally, has the technology reached the apex of its evolution? And I think the answer to that is, from all the experts, is categorically not. Like it has not reached the apex of its innovation. There's so much more left in terms of applications of what can be done with AI. The real underlying question that they're asking is, but are the companies that are doing AI overvalued? Like in other words, like, is this just another version of the dot-com bubble for those of us that are
Yes.
that were old enough to remember the, man, I'm selling stocks online. Can I sell this company for $1 billion? Like, yeah,
Sure.
you got a dot-com in your name. You got a dot-com in your, everybody gets a dot-com, valuation. So and I think the answer to that is, and there was actually a great piece put out by the same guy, the whoever the Michael somebody, I can't remember his last name, but he was sort of one of the main characters in The Big Short, that Christian Bale played, that talked about just the pattern of like, yeah, we probably are seeing the apex for at least a period of time of valuations in AI companies. So that, in other words, like, if I wasn't already on the bandwagon, and nobody sue me because I'm not allowed to give investment advice. So this is just Adam talking, not Shoemaker's compliance team. Um, you know, like, hey, if you weren't already on the bandwagon with AI, a year ago, perhaps now is not a great time to
Yeah.
hop on the bandwagon. You might miss out on a little bit, but maybe just be a little more patient, watch things for a little bit and see what happens. So I think they're really talking about there being potentially a bubble, which really means that the valuation of the AI companies in general is overweighted relative to what they're actually worth, especially for some that don't really have, proven revenue models and proven streams, which kind of gets to the heart of Warren Buffett style investing, which took me a long time to kind of really understand. So I'm going to try to break this down into purple dinosaur level that even Gary can understand. I'm just kidding with that, Gary.
Good. Yeah.
The
It'll
the
be purple for K-State. So
yeah,
I'm in.
yeah. So if we have any doctors or anybody in the medical profession on this call that are notoriously horrible at making investment decisions, that's just a fact. This is generally the Warren Buffett method of investing, because you hear about two different types of investing: growth investing, value investing. What we're seeing right now with AI is growth investing. Like, given no facts other than just that belief that this has got to turn out well. I mean, there are some underlying facts, but a belief that it's got to turn out well. I'm pumping money into companies that are going to have exponential growth, regardless of what they're doing today. That's growth investing. And that definitely would be characteristic of what we're seeing with AI right now. Another version of that would be, why is it that Tesla is more valuable than Ford Motor Company? When Ford Motor Company absolutely outperforms Tesla in terms of vehicles manufactured, profit per vehicle, all the stuff that you would expect to see, right? So, and even with the dip, I believe Tesla's still more valuable than Ford. So that's the definition of growth. The definition of value, which is what Warren Buffett does, really has two components. Component number one is, I believe, and this is like the fire sale component, is I believe that the assets of this company are worth more, like literally their stuff, tangible stuff I can put a finger on, are actually worth more than what the current market price is. So if you think about what that means, if I was buying a factory, it would literally be like, hey, they're selling the factory for $100, but I'm pretty confident that even if I just liquidated the factory, I could get $200 for it. That's the definition of value investing in example A. Where you saw that firsthand close to home is the infamous Warren Buffett investment in Bank of America in the Great Recession, when the bank bailouts were happening. Famously, while getting in the bathtub, Jack, which is a picture that I don't want to actually know, but you're welcome for that gift, by the way. Warren Buffett made the decision to invest a lot of money in Bank of America in the form of a new preferred treasury stock, because at that moment in time, because of all the write downs that the regulators were forcing banks to take, Warren Buffett believed that the value of his investment was worth, like, he like the price that he was paying was actually less than just the stated book value at that point in time. Like if you looked at the balance sheet of Bank of America at that point in time, his investment was like 75 cents on the dollar just for the liquidation value of Bank of America at that time. And because he was putting so much money in, they were willing to give him a sweetheart deal. He made a freaking killing off that deal, an absolute freaking killing. Which lesson number one in that, besides like, hey, that's a good way to buy a company, but that's rare. Like very rare do you get a deal like that. But the reason he was able to get a deal like that is because he had the freaking cash available.
Exactly.
Make it like there were only so many people in the world that could even made that deal, and it's called like the Saudi Crown Prince Fund, or the Qataris, you know, or some wealthy, family in Europe that I don't even know who they are, or Berkshire
Charles
Hathaway.
Koch.
Yeah, I don't even know if the Koch brothers could have done that one. So
No, probably not.
so that's number one. The slightly less awesome version of that, but still pretty darn cool one that Buffett does, which I think we're going to go more into today, is that, you know, let's say that the market price of the company is currently above what the liquidation value is, which is their book value. So it's above. But if I actually just play out the future cash flow of the company and value it based on future cash flows, the value based on the future cash flows is actually more than what the market price is today. That's the other version of value, which just says that ultimately this thing's going to catch up, and the market price is eventually going to converge on the value of the cash flow. It's just temporarily undervalued. That's his other way of buying companies, is based on their future cash flow relative to their market price today. And he buys them. He buys them at a discount because for whatever reason the market thinks it's a dog. It doesn't give him credit for it. Which again, CPA firms actually were the classic example of that. Nobody liked us. Everybody hated us. We needed to eat some worms. Like if you looked at our cash flow, it wasn't radically different. For like, somebody make this case to me. The difference between a CPA firm and a dental practice in terms of recurring revenue and cash flow is what, people? The answer is literally zero, other than maybe in the dental practice, the payer is an insurance company sometimes.
Right.
Nothing else is really different. Yet the valuation multiples, dentists were valued at like 3 times what a CPA practice was valued at, until private equity finally got bored and ran out of dentists to buy. And then shockingly, the valuation started catching up to, where the cash flow showed that they really should be. So that we were an example of value-based investment until now we're not. So anyway, that's just sort of the theory of what Warren Buffett does when you hear the difference between value investing and growth investing. With that in mind, I will now shut up, Gary. That's enough out of me.
Oh, that's so good. So before we dive into some of, like, I've got 9 pages of notes from the time with him that was before the dinner. But I want to address Matt's thing. So I think you nailed it, Adam, because here was the deal at dinner. I'm hearing from this woman who is very much like, she was with Salesforce, she was with Microsoft. Like, she is at a much higher level than Gary Fry, believe me. But she was talking about, and her whole business is AI. The CEO and founder of a company that has a $400 million valuation called her and said, would you consider merging with us or buying us? She's not a $400 million company, because they have been laying off people, and they were at hundreds of people and they're down to like 20 something now. I mean, and what she was describing, and she said that his equity in the company, even though it had a $400 million net worth was like $1. Like it's so underwater. They're just looking. And she said, this is rampant. And so what she was describing was exactly what Adam talked about. You know, growth. Hey, if it's got .com, and I lived through that. I was the first president of bizjournals.com. And man, did I see some crazy, 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 crazy stuff. We ran our company fiscally conservative because Ray Shaw was our chairman. And man, believe me, he ran it fiscally conservative to the point where I thought, man, we are like the way of the dodo bird because everybody else has these crazy valuations. We put $1 million with a company that was a competitor, $40 million burn rate, losing 40 million a year on a 1 million top line. So burning 40, had 1 million top line. They sold to NBCI for $225 million about a month before the crash. Well, it was all based on hope and change, but not on any fundamentals. And so if you ever spent any time in San Francisco, right after the dot-com bubble burst, you had a bunch of people that were planning on buying Ferraris and Lamborghinis, or maybe they did, but their owners had done well, but everybody else was just carnage. And so I agree with that. What she described sounded eerily similar to the .com craze. Solid companies are going to still outperform and still survive. The ones that are running loose and fast will not, which kind of leads me into this thing with. So I got to hear Eric, and I'm going to screw up his last name. It's Kruke, I think, Krucke, and he was the CFO for um, it was a custom framing company that had one location, but Warren Buffett saw it, and then they grew it to, I think, 26 or something, and then in multiple countries, grew it up, and then he saw where this thing is going to start tanking because of trends, and then sold it in time. Um, but so I'm going to just give you some of the highlights and things that I wrote that I thought were really interesting. Um, One is he said, "Hey, Warren Buffett is reading 5 newspapers every day. He still does it, and it's like why? Because he has his fingers on the pulse of the market view, and we'll talk about these 4 quadrants that they talked about: market view, management team, the model, and money, cash. So I'll talk about that, but." The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and we've all seen this, Jack has been in the thick of it, so has Adam, and so have I, and that is, so what are the reasons that a business is going to transfer ownership? And the 3 big ones start with D. So can anybody, and there will be a Starbucks gift card thanks to Shoemaker, for anybody that can give me one of the 3 Ds that a company is going to transfer? Yes, Jim Maracchio. That is, uh, oh yeah, oh yeah. Matt, man, I mean, and Matt actually has 3 of them that are in there. So I think Matt and Jim both got it, but neither of you hit the number one. There's one. So you guys mentioned divorce, death. Let's see, what were the other ones that I saw here? Hold on.
Disability.
Disability. Yep. And disability, disease, and death were kind of lumped together. Divorce is actually number 2. Anybody have an idea for Maracchio? No, this is a family-friendly webinar, and I'm not going to mention it. But the number one reason, Adam, Jack, What do litigators do?
Hmm.
They
Well,
resolve.
I was thinking business divorce, but I mean that's the
Well,
same.
yeah. So dispute.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's the number one issue. Wow. Okay, makes sense. But if so, whether you're looking to sell or not, you want to maximize the value of your company. You want to make it run as efficiently as possible and give you the freedom so that you're not bound to being a slave to your own company. And so that was a lot of the stuff. But so I'll deal with these 4 points. Market view. So, like I said, Buffett reads 5 newspapers a day. Um, the interesting thing that he mentioned as part of this market view. So, a quote from Buffett is, "It doesn't matter what you think." And what he talked about was, it doesn't matter what you think your company's valued at. It doesn't matter what you think the trend is going to be. It doesn't matter what you think about how great or how terrible this company is. What matters is what's the market's view. Doesn't matter what your view is, which I thought that
Eye
was
of
like, I like
beholder.
this. Yeah, I love the simplicity of Buffett. Um, but one of the things, so he always says, start with the end in mind. And so he said, you better have, and like shameless plug, but I was really glad to hear this. You better have a great investment banker by your side that knows and that lives in your space. Uh, all right. Shout out to Scott Upton. You're a good, really good investment banker in his niche, and but he knows it. And he talked about the difference between investment bankers and business brokers that are dealing with smaller companies, et cetera. But you better have somebody that knows how to make the market. CPA, and your CPA better be well versed in tax strategy and the quality of financials, and have been by the side of other CP or other business owners and have done a number of transactions. But the quality of earnings is the number one thing, and then tax um, mitigation, and knowing like, all right, there are some tax abilities, or whether it be the structure and move into a C corp or to another structure. If you do anything within a 2-year time frame or under it, you're host, because the IRS wants their money. And so you've got to abide, and you got to have somebody that actually knows what they're talking about. And then Jack, of course, he said, you better have a good M&A attorney. Don't settle for a general attorney that's been by your side. You went to high school together, went to college, you were fraternity brothers or sisters in the sorority, whatever. Make sure you have somebody that's actually done this. And then the final one was, have a good financial advisor and estate planning person. You need that cadre of professionals around you. Um, and he said, the tax planning and positioning for whatever, whether you're looking where you think you would sell to a strategic buyer, whether you would sell internally, do an ESOP or whatever, make sure that you're doing your planning in advance. We've talked about this so many times. How many years are ideal, Adam, Jack, before a sale?
Oh, and but people always say, yeah, Jack's slowly raising his hand. I'll let Jack go. You can here my gift to you, Jack. You can answer a question.
I'm gonna guess that the average is about 5 years, but it depends on the condition of the business and how long it takes it to become that more valuable, more sexy, and the willingness of the owner to do things that he or she needs to do, the willingness of it, the ability to afford to do it, or to basically punt and say, okay, and that may be a strategy. And Gary and I were talking about this recently, is okay, do you do that? Do you make the effort of doing that? Or do you basically say, hey, potential buyer, here's something that I just don't have any interest in doing or ability to do or money to do. but an opportunity that's sitting there, low hanging fruit, come buy my company and take it off like a rocket. And so that's also an option as well. So that's a long-winded way of saying it depends, but I would guess that the average is probably 5 years.
Yep, that's what he was saying. He's like, hey, what you want ideally is 5 years, 3 to 5 years in advance of where you're wanting to go so that you've got time to get things clean, you get your team aligned, and things are in order because that's when you will have your greatest multiples.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go
Can,
ahead.
can I just want to make sure that we have some clarity on that, Gary, because a lot of people really get hung up on this piece, because if I hear that as a business owner, you know, I'm sure that Jack was way more responsible than I was. But when I hear that as a business owner, that's sort of in my it's going to cost $200,000 to put your kid through college, so you need to start saving now bucket. And it's like
Right.
I hear that when they're already like 14.
Oh, yeah, right.
And I'm like, that's freaking mathematically impossible. Like it would be mathematically impossible for me to pull that off. Therefore, it's not that I'm going to put my head in the sand. It's just like I can't do anything with that. Like that, the implication of that is the boatsman children will not attend college then. Like that, like that's the implication that if you didn't do this, you're not um, going to college. The boatsman kids will not go to college. But that's not actually what happened. Just somehow what happened is, with a meager college savings, the boatsman family still managed to make it through college. Wasn't optimal, but that's just what
Yeah.
that's what we did. So when you hear this, 5 years out, you actually said it, Gary, but I want to make sure we bring a lot of clarity to it. It does not take 5 years to sell your company. If you said
Right.
tomorrow, I'm ready to sell my company, if you have positive cash flow, and are somewhat reasonable on the price that the company is worth today, you'll have it sold in, 6 to 9 months. It's more like the point that you just said, to maximize value,
Correct.
and to make the process painless, where
Or
it
less
by
painful.
yeah, and maximize the value. I mean, and if you go back to like, what Jack and I have seen in terms of real world examples, it really is. If you think about it from a true wealth perspective, you know, let's say that I hire Scott Upton tomorrow, and I run an investment or any investment banker or business broker, and I run a process, and it's like I've got $100,000 in earnings. It's the starting point of my valuation, just to keep the math simple. And you go to Scott meets with you, says, "Hey, I think maybe we could do about 9." You're like, "But my buddy at the country club said I could get 12." Well, I think we can get 9. And you go, "Okay, well, let's run a process." And you run a process and you get 10. So you get $1 million off $100,000 in cash flow. And at the same time, you knew that you could have done, you know, like, okay, that's awesome. By the way, nobody on the call think that you're going to get a 10x multiple off 100 grand. You're not. I'm just trying to keep the story simple. The thing is, though, if you'd have been doing what Gary just suggested and is in this presentation, 100 probably would have been 2 to 300 as your starting point. And you still would have had the 10 multiple, but maybe it would have been 11. So not only did you give up the higher starting point at the same multiple, but you also gave up the extra cash flow that was generated in that multi-year period that you could have been investing. So that is 4 or 500 grand in this example. So, and these are all like, not like, I don't know how I would have done that, Gary. Geez, I mean, that interesting, example there. That's called like improved gross profit by a percentage point a year. if even that. That's called, hey, be a little bit quicker on the draw with switching people out that aren't working in your organization.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
actually analyze your cost structure every year instead of just spending we've had several webinars on like, that the sneaky killer of, you know, subscription agreements that you just haven't paid attention to anymore, that people are still just doing. Like, it's like a lot of little paper clips, that all add up to a lot of value that's left on the table, that you're just, you're not going to argue or add backs, because like the buyer's going to say, well, if they were add backs, why didn't you do them? And you're like, because I'm an idiot. Well, if you're an idiot, why would I want you to buy your car? Instead, you just give up. You say, you know what? I got a 10 multiple. That's amazing, Jack. I mean, sure it wasn't the 12, but that guy was probably lying anyway at the country club. Well, no, it's the 10 multiple is not the thing we need to focus on. What we need to focus on is the starting point should have been 2 to 300, and instead it was 100. That's what you're talking about with this. And you can't, the thing is though, you can't make that kind of turn. Like, you can make a pretty substantial turn in, 1 year. But if you think about, well, what's private equity typically looking for, it's anywhere between 15 to 20% of earnings growth every year under their watch, which come through a combination of cost savings plus growth. Well, there's your 5 years. Like, that's just math. Like, that's like, why can't you do, like, what's stopping you from doing what private equity thinks that you'll be capable of once they give you the money? And the punchline is nothing. So why don't you just freaking do it?
Yeah.
Soapbox complete. I don't know.
Well,
It's something about the sun, Gary, that's like got me all
I
fired
love
up
it.
today. Yeah.
Man, I'm with you.
I'll add to that one thing also. The impact is less cash, or you're going to have to wait for your money in the form of an earnout,
Right.
or in the form of a promissory note with a longer installment plan associated with that, because a buyer is going to put the risk back on the seller to prove, because no one has a crystal ball. But if you have better data and you've been doing things a certain way, and it is recurring, it's historical, then it's easier to go at a buyer and say, okay, yeah, no, I want more cash up front, or you're going to release the hold back sooner. You're not going to hold it for 2 years. You're going to hold it at max, 1 year, with half of it being released in 6 months. Or you get creative and say, well, there are two different buckets of money. One is specifically for reps and warranties, and the other is for other things, or net working capital adjustments, those kind of things. So there are ways around that, but yeah, another detrimental impact is you not getting your money until later.
So you said you actually said two of the four-letter words that he said that Buffett always focuses on, that he said every business owner needs to focus on: cash and risk. Cash and risk. And I am, like, one of my favorite things that he said too. I'm going to get ahead of myself and I'll come back to it. But he said PE firms cut overhead and people that the owner typically didn't have the courage to make when they should have. They get a bad rap for cutting the people and overhead that should have been cut, but the owner didn't have the courage to make, which is, I'm like, wow. Um, really good. There's just so many nuggets in this thing, but he also talked about, and I think it might be worth going into this, like the delineation a little bit, and why the sources of capital are different, and the fallacies that come with the different sources of capital. Private equity, what is it? It's like funds, Alpine, big funds, etc. They have money to deploy. And the longer that they hold this capital, tougher it is. They need to deploy it because they need to have return on investment. They get a bad rap, and some of it by design and on purpose, because rip, strip, flip, which I abhor, which is why I don't like a lot of private equity, but not all of them do that. Berkshire Hathaway would be considered private equity. They are more buy and hold. Um, but then you've got family offices. Well, what is that? That is money that's with a family, and they are looking to do what Warren Buffett was doing. Hey, we're going to go and invest in stuff because it's not just in the market. We want to actually own some companies. And a lot of times he said people will think, oh, well, family office and it's so and so family and whatever, it'll be great. Well, and they're going to hold it forever. He said nobody holds anything forever. They'll hold it until it's not good anymore. But don't just think because they're nice people or whatever that they are going to help you grow your company. If they don't have expertise in that area, don't go for it. Strategic buyers, we can talk a little bit like, that's somebody that's in your industry. It makes sense for you to be rolled in, but guess what? You're changing your jersey. You're going to be wearing their jersey. There's no such thing as a merger of equals. I don't believe it. Even though the banks all claim to have it, I don't believe it. Then you have management and employees, ESOPs, right? And then you have next generation. Oh, Gary Jr. is coming up. What are we going to do? Well, I'm grooming Gary Jr. for it. So those were the big areas that he was talking about and the nuances between the two. What was interesting too, he talked about classic leverage being like 30%, like for private equity. Say they buy your company for $100 million. $30 million of that is going to go from they're going to pay it out, but then they're going to borrow 70 million, 30, 70, and they're going to borrow that from banks or other lending sources. And he said that the reason the PE firms are calling right now is there's just fewer companies, especially with over 100 employees. And they're still sitting on a lot of cash and they've got to deploy it. The longer they hold it, the worse it is. So that's why one other thing that I thought was interesting. So it was like, do you know where PE firms make their money? Adam, Jack, how are they making their money?
By buying companies, improving them and making them more marketable and then selling them for more than what they purchased them for.
Carried interest. That's correct. That's where the bulk of it is. And then they have fees that they're getting 2%, but of that raise or whatever, they get 2%, but that's only typically for 5 years. That's why they typically want to flip it in 3 to 5 years. So if they're holding it longer than that, because it wasn't the market wasn't favorable, they're getting more and more pressure because they're not getting those fees and they need to get the carried interest. So Buffett and this guy, Eric, they think that we've got 3 to 5 more years of the current environment. Who knows? Who knows? Don't know.
That
But
that's that. Can I interrupt you, Gary? Sorry.
yeah,
Well, that can I interrupt you? I interrupted you, Gary.
go for it. You would anyway.
Yeah, that kind of that aligns, from a time frame perspective. They're saying 3 years. The economist that I follow, which is pretty prominent in uh, Vistage and EO and a few other
Yeah,
groups, which is ITR. Um, their version of the three years, they've been talking about a 2030, deep recession, possible depression. 2030
yeah,
meaning sometime in the 2030s, and that they say, they say it's more of a function of um, the national debt continuing to increase. You know, can't count on China because their population's in decline. Um, our population needs to get a little bit better, but at least we have that going for us. It just needs to get a little bit better. Just a series of just factors that would say, hey, all of this has to come to a head at some point. And somewhere in the 2030s is when all of the negative things, if they follow on their same patterns, would tend to converge together. So my point in saying that is like, they're not, who you just heard is not the only person saying like, it is, you know, better than 50-50 that something's going to go down here in the foreseeable future. Probably not in the next 12 to 18 months, but in the foreseeable future.
Yeah. What's interesting too is regarding PE firms, before I go to family offices, he said they're extending lengths of term for the holds from the typical 5 to 7 years to 10 to 30 years now, which is interesting. Regarding family offices, this was a shocker to me. He said their amount of capital to deploy is now equal to PE, about $1 trillion between all the family offices and PE. That was shocking to me. And here, two things that he said: if you're considering family office money, because they're calling, and I get family office inquiries a couple times a month right now, still about BGW, even though we're part of Ascend. But he said if you're considering, they better have expertise in your area, otherwise you're asking for trouble. And the second thing is you have to ask this is the question, the operative question. Write this one down. What is the motivation behind this deal? What is motivating you for my company? Find that out. And on the strategic buyers, like, all right, so hey, we're in your footprint, or we're not in your footprint, but you want to have a foothold in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're calling on you, and we're in the same industry. We're peers. We're a little bigger. You're a strategic play for us. They typically pay the most because they understand the industry. They're in it, and like, hey, you're attractive for whatever reason. He said, follow the money, where their purchase dollar is coming from. He said if it's coming from PE or if it's coming from banks, because he said if you know where the money source is, you will understand the pain. Like when things get tough, oh no, it's going to be great. We're going to hold you forever, until it's not. So you need to know, because a PE firm is going to be like 70% debt to 30% equity ratio. He said a bank is typically more like 90% debt. So if things get sideways faster and it's bank money behind that PE firm, guess what? You're going to be on chopping block. Very interesting. Management, he's like, ESOPs, you still need to have your stuff in order. And even next generation, he said only 7% of companies survive the next generation. Only 7%. That was shockingly low, from what I saw. Then the other thing that I thought was interesting. So I want you to picture the Apple logo, single bite. And he flipped it so that he didn't get sued for copyright infringement. But he said the potential outcome, like the single bite, is a bolt on. All right, I'm buying you, I'm bolting you onto my existing machine. You're going to get a single bite of the apple. A platform, which is what we were with BGW for Ascend, a platform, they see you as more valuable, but the second bite of the apple, when they recapitalize the funding source or whatever, that's always, he said, always more valuable than the first bite. And then he said the last one, there's a cash cow. And he said there's nothing wrong with a cash cow where, hey, this thing's just printing money, I want to run it. But he said, remember this, all cows die. So he said, the key on a cash cow is to have be able to outguess when that thing is going to die. What's the trend? And this goes back into the market view in particular. Um, Management team. This was a quote by Buffett that I thought was really good. And this is on value, right? He said, when we buy a business, we're buying the people to run it, period. Yeah, they're looking at the other fundamentals, but the people, and that's where he said, you know, um, the good firms have cut the bad people out. The bad firms, where the PE firms get the strip it, and flip it kind of thing, is where they made the hard decisions that the other founders and the other management team was not willing to make. And he said a lot of times what happens is we need to be objective in the look of our management team, and do we have the right people in the right seats, or have we allowed somebody to Peter Principle up, or where we've allowed them to maintain a position and a title that they're not qualified for in that size of a company, because that will really hurt you. So I just thought that was really pretty powerful. The
And
third,
here's an example of that in motion, which is you have a seller who has done that, whether it's a family member or it is a key employee, someone who's been around, but just, like you said, has that title, has that position, has that salary and the bonuses. And so a buyer comes along and says, yeah, well, that person is not efficient, not productive. It's diminishing versus additive. And so, yeah, but the seller says, but that person has to have a job after. And then the buyer's reaction is, okay, share some of your, that's fine. If you want to take
yeah,
care of those people, of your people, totally get it. But that's on you. So you want to give them, a bonus at the end of the transaction. That's again totally up to you. And then they can use that money as severance essentially, and then go find another job. And you can help them find the other job. So again, not trying to be flippant, but that's ends up what happens when you have an aggressive buyer that is like, okay, you can do that, but it's on you, it's not going to be on us.
yeah, that's really good. I'm gonna race through the next two M's because these are really good. Again, you have market dynamics, you have management team, the model. So this is the third one. He said tech-enabled growth engines. He said build engines, not teams. Um, Processes and systems. Like they're looking for systems, not just the superstar. Oh, what happens if the superstar gets hit by a bus or whatever? You got to be focused on building uh, engines, not teams. That doesn't take away from the importance of the team, but you better have good engines and processes and procedures. And so he said the key is to optimize and de-risk. 80, what they do, he said Berkshire does this. It's the 80/20 rule, where 80% of the profits come from 20% of the customers and products. They go in and they cut 80% of the laggards. Boom. When they go in, the 80% that's, that's lagging the 20% that's driving 80%, they remove immediately. They move quickly. Thought that was pretty powerful. Um, and then money. This is where it goes kind of back to what we were talking about. Lock down the financial operations. He said, um, you need to be more forward looking. Only, he said, spend 80% of your time looking at future, and only 20% looking at the past, and like past, past fundamentals and actuals, but be looking and focused 80% of your time on the future. But he said you better have 5-day financials, like a month end. He wants financials for the prior month in 5 days. And I had a client that was 3.5 months, and it was a $50 million company. I was coaching, and the CEO is like, "Well, do you do personal development and individual coaching?" And I'm like, "For what?" And he said, "For my director of finance." And I'm like, That isn't going to cut that, man. I mean, that person is in way over their heads, and I'm not even a finance guy. Adam's a good finance guy. I am not. But I know the simplistic view. I'm like, no, you should be at 5 to 7 days on your close. That isn't going to do it. Like I said, dude, you are driving down 77 at 80 miles an hour, and the windshield's painted black. You can't see through it. This is a very dangerous thing. You got to get that. And so, and he said, you need to have 5 day financials and be audit ready. Audit ready. That's where you want to be. If again, if you want to maximize the value, the more messy you are, the lower your valuation is going to go. And the more risk you're going to be taking on a transaction because they're going to make you pay.
And similar to what Adam said previously about the whole 5 years and, stressing business owners out, 5 days, that's aggressive. It's achievable, but you take it in bites. If you are
Yeah,
20 days out, get it to 15, get it to 10,
right.
because it is incumbent on the people, but also the process and what you're doing. If you don't have the system set up to appropriately log in your revenue and expenses and everything else, then that's the bottleneck. You could have the smartest person in the world running something that is dysfunctional because of the technology and the processes that are implemented.
Right on. So two more things, and then I'll conclude what were the highlights that I wrote down. Another Buffett quote: "Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked." That's a word picture. But he says, so here's the question. Might be worth a Starbucks card from Shoemaker, but here's the question. Why do most businesses fail? It goes to one of the 4 letter words we talked about earlier. Adam, when you've seen somebody go down, what was the reason that they failed?
Um, you said a 4 letter word, and I'm like scrambling for like 4 letter words. But more often than not, I mean, it literally just comes down
Ah,
to an unwillingness to not do what needed to be done.
well, that's true, but Matt nailed it. So you got to get this to Matt. And he misspelled it. He forgot a letter. He had a 3 letter word. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, Matt. You got it. Cash. They ran out of cash.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Out of
100% of
cash.
businesses that run out of cash will go under. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And scaling fast, Costco, well, actually, Dell Computer, they were growing so fast, but they were running out of cash and they were this far from going down. And they changed their model from bill you after we deliver your computer to cash up front, and then we do the custom build. Simple little thing. Costco did a similar thing. Costco, very intensive in capital when they would go put in a new Costco. So what did they do? They created a membership model. Now their membership model has so much cash and it fuels it to where they can pay cash opening up a new place, which is just interesting to me. So good job, Matt. You were paying attention till the very end. Reminder next week, Thanksgiving. So we're shut down. We are not going to do this. You enjoy the turkey. I'm going to try smoking one for the first time. I've always had brother-in-laws that were doing it, but we're doing it at our house. And so wish me well. If you have any tips, Adam, because you are a grill master, I may need it. But I ordered a brine kit and the whole thing. But man, I want to put it on my Traeger and smoke this baby. And so we'll see. Um, Anything else? Any final thoughts, Adam or Jack?
About, about the turkey, low. Um, but then also remember that most of the smoke is infused in the first couple hours. So just, think about that in the context of, hey, if you need to bring the temperature up or maybe finish it in the oven, there's no shame in that because most of the smoke
Okay.
that it's going to take on is in the first couple hours. Because
Okay, that's good.
if you over smoke it, then you end up with a not not a yay, that's super smoky. I love super smoky. More like it tastes like shit. Tastes like you ate an ashtray. So
Really?
yeah, I mean it's not that bad, but you can definitely taste like a weird taste in it instead of a perfect smoke taste.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll be pinging you
All
before
right.
I get going on it. But
For
hey,
for those of
enjoy
you
the
who
beach.
are deep frying, be patient. Do not turn the heat up because you will end up with a Clark Griswold dinner turkey. Let's say hypothetically, I might know that for one reason or another. Yeah, I actually years ago got lucky. It was charred black on the outside, but it was so good on the inside. I think I was like seconds away from totally obliterating the turkey. So be
Yeah.
patient.
Yeah. Remember, frying turkey is a 2 beer exercise, not a 4 beer exercise.
Oh man. Yeah, the
Smoking the turkey, that's a 12-pack exercise. So
yeah. Yeah, the Cherry Boys, Joe the fourth and Ben, they were talking about how they don't like turkey. They wanted to do brisket and they told their mom that and it was all almost sacrilegious to her like because they're like we don't like dry meat, you know. But they did a turkey. They did a deep fry and it was on a back porch. You should not be doing a deep fry in a back porch. And he said, needless to say, we did have charring of the ceiling in this, shanty or whatever. It was like their lake cottage or whatever. He said it was truly a cottage,
yeah,
that been in the place for a long time. But and they're like, yeah, they were in college at the time. So anyway, be careful out there. We'll put this up on the BGW YouTube channel. Shoemaker will do the same. Let me see if there's anything else before we leave. Yeah, to you too, Matt. What's your best pies? Oh, I'm a sucker for apple, but pumpkin, you got to have some pumpkin.
yep.
Come on. All right,
You
guys.
can.
You guys have a
All
good
right.
one.
See
See
you
y'all.
guys.
See
Bye
ya.
bye.